Hello, welcome to Life from Above. My name is David Kenney. Glad you can watch the program with us. I have a special guest, Jesse Phillips. Jesse Phillips is a student from the West Virginia School of Preaching, getting ready to graduate 2019. Jesse, it's great to have you with us.
Glad to be here, David. I really enjoyed the opportunity to be here on the program.
The West Virginia School of Preaching is directed by Andrew Robinson. I'll show you his picture up here, and if you want some more information about the school, Andy would love to talk to you about that. If you have interest in that. Jesse is a second generation student, which I thought, okay, what are they talking about? But they're talking about your father. Your father graduated from the school.
Yeah, he was actually in the first class to graduate.
Okay. And he's preaching in, where's he preach at?
Belington, West Virginia.
So I know the area well. Matter of fact, my sister was born in Phillip. We used to live in that area, so very familiar with it. One of the things that Andy said about Jesse, he says, following graduation, Jesse will be working 1 year for the Pennsboro Church in that internship, then looking for a full-time preaching position. We're confident this young man will do well. Jesse has been a great help around the school, always offering if there's anything he can do to help. And that's so important because, as you know, and I'm sure your father's told you and you've seen it, preaching is more than just what you do behind a pulpit.
Mm-hmm. The role of a preacher is more than just getting behind the pulpit and speaking, of course. You're no better than anyone else. If the example's been used, you have a child that's sick out in the foyer and no one's able to clean up, you're not any better than the mother who has to clean up. You should be just as willing to do that yourself.
It's part of being a servant.
Yes.
That's right. One of the things I've had spent the last few weeks with Jesse, and one of the things that interested me about him was he has a lot of interest in electrical work. He's an electrician. Why don't you tell him a little bit about your experience with that? Because I always find that interesting.
Well, electrical work, it's rather dangerous if you don't know what you're doing. Looking at just some interesting facts, a normal light bulb that we have, it takes about 1/10 of an amp to stop the heartbeat of a human being. The normal light bulb that you have in the house, it can stop your heart about 5 times over. Electrical work, it's very finicky. You have to figure out how things work. If you don't wire things up correctly, you burn up motors. But it's something we've come to rely on and something people like having around people that know how to work with this stuff.
So you went to some electrical training schools.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's a lot of talk these days about going to a trade school instead of going to a liberal arts college, which, whatever option people want to do. So you did that, you have that training, and now you decided you want to go to the West Virginia School of Preaching and preach. Now, preaching is not new to you. You've done some preaching before you came to school.
Yeah, I've been preaching for over 10 years now, consistently. First time preaching was probably about 13 years ago, but consistently on a normal schedule, about 10 years I've been doing it. But you could say I'm used to it a little bit.
So you mentioned about, obviously your father's a preacher, and you're training to be a preacher. You've already done some preaching and all that. And we talked a little bit, but not a lot about, your father obviously has an impact on you in some way, but you also told me you had other reasons in addition to your father's influence why you wanted to be a preacher. What were some of those influences?
Well, the best example would probably be Jesus. I was talking to you before. I said that I wasn't following in his footsteps. The reason why is I'm trying to follow in Christ's. You look at Christ, and he loved mankind enough to come and suffer and die. He was willing to do that, and he showed his love to man. I should be willing to show the same amount of love and devotion to other people.
Okay. Let me ask you a little bit more about your family, because I know your father, but why don't you tell me a little bit about your family?
Well, currently my grandmother, she's the only grandparent that I have surviving right now. She lives over in Collier's Way, just I guess you could say a stone's throw from Weirton. My mother, she is currently working in Elkins Rehabilitation Center. She is the activities director. So she keeps the residents there occupied throughout the day. My sister, she's going back to school for her master's in education, and my brother is working in the medical field right now in sterilization. But overall, I guess you could say they're all doing pretty well at the moment.
Well, great. Good. Well, now obviously you live in West Virginia.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of great preaching schools. There's good colleges that they'll train you to be a preacher and all that. But you selected West Virginia School of Preaching. Was that the right decision for you?
I think it was, and the reason why, it's a little bit of partiality because, first of all, if I go somewhere else, I'm not saying that they wouldn't be as friendly. I wouldn't have the connections there that I do here in West Virginia. Here, I know the teachers. I'm able to relate to them. I think I have a better learning experience from them than I do if I would have went to one that was down south or in Texas or whatever.
So you knew people already,
Yeah.
So you're able to strengthen those relationships
Mm-hmm.
and build upon them. What has been your favorite class so far?
Probably my favorite class so far would have to be 1st and 2nd Peter, 1st, 2nd, 3rd John, and Jude. And the reason why, Terry Jones is the teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And we always joke around with him. He likes to do alliteration when he's working with his outlines. Yes, that's true, but when he's breaking things down, he does so in a way that I firmly believe a young child could understand what's going on. It's broken down so well that you could easily take the material he's given you and immediately incorporate it into a Bible class.
Yeah, Terry Jones is outstanding.
Yes.
Outstanding teacher, and he does use a lot of alliteration, and it's always to the benefit of the student. And
Mm-hmm.
I can remember reading about J.W. McGarvey, which some people may or may not recognize that name, but I think the London Times said he was like one of the ripest scholars in the world, biblical scholars. And I can remember reading someone said something about his sermons and said they were so sound, but also they were so well done that even a child could follow them. And Terry sort of reminds me of that because, like you said, he breaks it down and he makes it very easy to understand. So, very good. Let me ask you another question about some of your other classes.
Mm-hmm.
What other classes did you have that you enjoyed, or some of your other teachers?
Well, Dan Kessinger, you have to give the man credit. He's doing so many other things at one point in time. He's working with insurance. He's also a musician. And then on top of that, he decides, I'm going to take it up a notch. I'm going to go to the school, and he's teaching multiple classes. First of all, because yes, they need people to do it. But second of all, he's very good at it. He's a very knowledgeable man. He talks in a way that's common, that people can understand, but it's deep, just like I mentioned with Terry. We've had language arts as a basis, which if you're going to be a preacher, you need to, first of all, understand structure with writing. Both, first of all, for if you're writing an article or something like that, but also when you're writing out your sermon outline, you're going to inevitably find someone that's going to say, hey, can I have a copy of that? You don't want to give someone chicken scratch. It makes people think less of you. And then there are multiple other classes dealing with like Hebrew history. The teacher of that class, Jack Gilchrist, is very good at his job. Many other things, Bible geography, so on and so forth.
Now, you mentioned in this profile that they wrote up and gave to me about you that you're going to be doing the internship at Pennsboro.
Yes.
Now, how long will that last?
That will last for a year, and by that time, they may or may not be tired of me and send me away.
Well, the idea, I guess, is they're training, giving you additional training And of course, Terry's a preacher there, so
Mm-hmm.
you'll get to work more closely with him, which that'll be a huge benefit to you. So
Yep.
I'm sure you'll enjoy that very much. So you're going to do the internship after that, and then what do you see happening when you finish the internship?
My goal is I want to find a congregation that needs a preacher. Of course, that's what everyone wants to do. I want to find somewhere where the congregation is looking to grow, not just simply, oh, we need someone to fill the pulpit, and oh, you do a good job, and that's all they do. Yes, the preacher's job, he's to deliver the lessons and whatnot. He's the one who's, in a sense, he's helping feed the congregation. But it shouldn't just stop there and he's the only one that's doing it. He shouldn't be the only one that's growing the congregation. The congregation itself should be working alongside the preacher to help it grow and further the gospel, bringing more people to Christ.
I always like to ask, and sometimes this question comes up frequently, is what's your favorite book of the Bible?
That varies. Of course, as you know, it depends on what's going through studies. Right now, I don't know why, but I'm favoring the book of James. And I think the reason why is I've described James as this. It's not in a mean way of describing it. It's a jumbled up mass of wonderful things that members of the church, when they look at this, they take it and apply to their lives. When I'm working up a sermon, I find more often than not the subject I'm dealing with, I can find something in James that helps me bring the point across.
It's a very practical, applicable book. Yeah, it's an outstanding book. Now, you're at WCTV Studios here in Wadsworth with me, and they'll show the interview first, but we did the lessons before we doing the interviews. So this is your first television experience. What's your impression, since you've already recorded the show, what's your impression of the TV work?
Well, I believe TV work is something that needs to be done. Yes, you have all these news outlets, and you have TV shows as well that's trying to push, I guess you would say, liberal agenda. Not talking about like the left. I'm talking about things that are against the Bible. You have lifestyles that are being pushed against that. We need to have representatives on these networks as well. And I think what you're doing here, along with GBN and other things, I believe that those are needed things, and I believe they're very helpful.
So did you like being on TV?
Oh, I thought it was very good. Of course, when you get on TV the first time, you're nervous, but you've heard me say it before. If you get up to speak at all and you're not nervous, you're probably dead.
It's a part of it.
Yeah.
It's a part of it. I always like it when somebody will say, well, there's nothing to preaching. Yeah, usually people that don't preach say that, if somebody's going to say it. And,
Yeah.
I asked them, so well, why don't you do it? Well, I couldn't speak in front of an audience. I would die. And I'm like, well, then I guess it's not all that easy, is it? No. So it's always interesting when that kind of thing happens. What would you say, there's somebody out there, a young man or maybe an older man? I mean, we need preachers, period, young or old. But maybe they're thinking about coming to the school. What words of advice would you want to share with them about attending the West Virginia School of Preaching?
I would say, don't go to the school if you think this is a way of getting out of work. Don't go to the school if you just don't want to go out and have a vocational job or anything like that. The way that we've been worded it, and I agree full-heartedly, if you can't do anything else but preach, if that's the only thing you can do, do that. And I don't mean that you have no other skills. I mean that just as Elijah, there's a fire in your bones and you can't keep it contained. The school, it's hard, but I believe that it's a very good thing and it can help prepare men to save souls.
So you found the studies challenging?
They're all challenging, but it doesn't mean that they're not worth it.
Sure, absolutely. What trying to complete a 2-year very rigorous program of study, it can get really discouraging, I imagine, at times. What were some sources, whether it be people or otherwise, of encouragement you found along the way?
Well, first of all, would probably have to be family. Looking at the graduates who have gone before as well, saying, I've gone through the same thing. Some of their teachers were a little bit rougher than the ones I have now. And they said, you're getting better grades, you're doing better than I was then, you'll be fine. Things like that. Probably the most important thing, the thing that can encourage you the most, is praying. And we often take it for granted. Christians often forget that we have a best friend that we can talk to when no one else is listening. He's always there for us, and he'll always hear us. He's always there to encourage us.
Now I know the students sometimes go out and do some preaching outside of school, but related to school. What are some of the places you preached at while you're in school?
I've been to 100 West Virginia. I've been down almost to Kentucky. I've been over into the Virginia area. I have been to the Elkins congregation, Buchanan, Sand Hill, which is a little bit outside of 100. And this November, the congregation that Brother Don Cooper was at, where was that again?
Bucyrus.
Bucyrus. They're having a one-day lectureship, and they've asked me to be the opening speaker for that.
Well, great. So you don't just sit around in the classroom the whole time?
No. If you just sit around in the classroom, you're not being useful.
All right, now, so you did some preaching before and then you come to the school, and now you're getting ready to preach here pretty soon. Graduation is June 14th, coming up, 2019. What things did you find surprising that you learned at the school that maybe you weren't aware of when you were preaching, or maybe it sort of amplified it in your mind? What did you learn from when you preached before and now you're going to ready to go to preach again? What kind of things have you learned?
Well, the things that I've learned, I guess I wouldn't say I've learned them. More so, I've come to the realization of how extreme it is. First of all, preaching, yes, people normally say, oh, preaching's nothing. Preaching's a lot harder than people make it out to be, first of all. Second of all, as the saying is, when you look at the scriptures, they're shallow enough that you can wade through them, but they're so deep that you're never going to reach the bottom. You look at, like I was mentioning earlier with Terry Jones's class, those books, they're just wee little books, and yet the topics are so incredibly deep. Even with his classes, how deep they went, I'm certain there are things that he missed. There's just so much that you can learn, and you'll never stop learning.
Now, what about, you mentioned the general epistles, that you enjoy that class, but when it comes to making your own sermons, what kind of themes do you like to, I know you're supposed to preach the whole counsel of God, no doubt about that, but what kind of subjects or themes do you enjoy preparing lessons and preaching on?
It all depends, honestly. Everyone loves doing encouragement sermons. Everyone loves a sermon such as Romans chapter 8, dealing with the end of it, dealing with all of these persecutions that it's possible for us to go through. And when we look at the end, yea, we are more than conquerors. They're all this stuff. We don't have to worry about it. None of these things can take us away from Christ. You look at 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, giving hope that, yes, some of our family and friends have passed on. There's hope for them and us as well. You look at other things like subjects in the book of Revelation, ultimately victory. Everyone enjoys the uplifting ones. I enjoy them. I think those would probably be my favorite.
Okay, very good. You mentioned Victory, of course, the West Virginia School of Preaching. Each October they have the Victory Lectures, which those are coming up pretty soon, and sure that you'll enjoy those. So you get the opportunity to attend those,
Yeah.
Which is a big benefit as well. Let me ask you this question. We talked in class about the importance of networking, and people, you have your teachers and you have your father, but who are some other people, outside of that immediate circle that really have had an impact on your life?
And to answer this, it's a very vague answer. Older ladies, believe it or not. For those young men and for older men that are wanting to preach, they'll find that probably their best critics are going to be the older ladies in the congregation. Yes, you're going to have them constantly coming up, oh, you did a good job, and occasionally they'll slip something in your hand and say, thank you very much, here's a little bit extra. But what's more important is you talk to them, and they'll let you know how it is. Well, I thought you could have done a little bit better. I think that your subject here could have been a little bit sharper. I think you could leave that part out and probably make another lesson. The older ladies, we don't really see them in the forefront. We don't really give them as much focus as they deserve, but they're kind of like grandmothers to us. They help you, they teach you what you're supposed to do, and they show you right from wrong.
That's right. There are probably more congregations whose doors are still open because of little old ladies.
The River congregation that's right outside of Buchanan, there was a point in time where there were only women there because all the men had died off. It's there still today with about 50 people because they stayed there and they continued.
I often point out, you talk about, people want to talk sometimes about gender roles and ministry and all that, and I always find it interesting, I like to point out that when Paul received the Macedonian call, it was a man in a vision, but when he got there, it was Lydia. Lydia is the first person he came in contact with, if I remember correctly, and she was a seller of purple, and she was there with a group of other ladies, and that's who we ran into first. And who knows how much Lydia did for the church, how long that congregation in Philippi went, we don't know, but that's a very good answer. Let me ask you another question as far as other influences. What have been some other influences you've had, maybe outside of people?
Well, of course, the gospel. You look at it, and one of the men you're going to be interviewing later, John Bennett, he recently did a Wednesday evening talk on Matthew 28:18-20. You look at the last portion of that, teaching them to observe all things whatsoever I have commanded you. Jesus is talking to his disciples here. He's telling them, go ye therefore, teach all nations. But here Jesus, he's saying, teach them to do the things that I have taught you to do, and that means go and teach all nations. So this command that applied to them, Jesus is also commanding me to do it, along with all other Christians who receive this.
Well, Jesse, it's been great having you in class. It's been great having you here in the studio, and we wish you all the best, and thanks for everything you've done.
Thank you for having me again, David, and look forward to seeing your shows in the future.
Okay. Well, that's all the time we have for Light from Above today. Thanks for watching our program. Before we close our program today, we'd like to take a moment and review this roadmap to heaven with you, since the matter is so serious. There are many incorrect set of directions out there, and sadly so many people are following them. For example, some people have been given wrong turns. They believe things such as faith only, works only, or grace only. Or some attempt to change the order of the turns, being baptized before they even believe. Some people fail to realize what point they are on the map. Don't even open their Bibles yet, and they think they're saved already. As a person travels in a car or takes a hike, has to follow the proper directions, so we must follow the proper directions to heaven. Let's take a look at the directions on our roadmap to heaven here. You have to look at these passages in your Bible for yourself. We'll just list the steps, the turns on the way. First is to believe or to have faith. And then number 2, to repent, to turn away from sin. Number 3 is to confess that Jesus is the Son of God. Number 4 is immersion, or to be baptized, which is a burial in water to have your sins washed away. And then you're added to the church by the Lord, not by a group of people, or not by giving some kind of testimonial experience or things like that. And then once you're added, you need to serve and worship the Lord faithfully all the days of your life. And the key word's faithfully. You don't waver. And that's very important. We need to keep in mind, too, that in Noah's day there was a big flood, and only people in the ark were saved from the flood. The same is true today. There is no salvation outside the Lord's church. Where are you on the roadmap to heaven? Thanks for watching our program. Please let us know if we can assist you with further information for your journey.
Satan scarcely must he